All right. Good morning, Doug. It's Friday, the day after Trump was convicted on 34 counts, I think it was. So we want to talk about that. But first, there was something of interest in the Encyclopedia Britannica today.
Well, the only thing that was really of interest today is something that very few people know about. I'd heard vaguely of this incident, the so-called Tulsa race massacre on this day in 1921. And the Encyclopedia Britannica says that it was one of the most severe instances of racial violence in U.S. history. Well, tell me about it. And it says that the massacre left somewhere between 30 and 300 people dead. Now, this is pretty amazing. This is not ancient history where you have to piece these things together from digging in the archaeology. I mean, we're talking about historic times when radio existed and there were many newspapers everywhere. This is only 1921, and it says a race riot where somewhere between 30 and 300 people died. That's a pretty wide range. That's a pretty inexact number. And it goes on to say that more than 1,400 homes and businesses were burned and nearly 10,000 people were left homeless. But it was only of one of the most severe instances of racial violence in U.S. history. Wow, based on that, I'd like to dig a little bit deeper. What was the most egregious race riot in U.S. history? Anyway,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I just did a search and it mentioned it definitely came up with the Tulsa one as the main one that it focused on, and then it says the Rosewood Massacre of 1923 in Florida was another extremely violent and destructive racist attack.
hmm,
Where I don't know if it doesn't, I don't see how many were killed there, but yeah, I'll see. But yeah, the numbers are strange. The difference between 30 and 300, like that, and I looked at the official record. The Tulsa, vital statistics says that it was 36, but then there was a report done in 2001, apparently, that came up with a different number. And that's where the 300 comes from.
yeah. Anyway, it was supposed to have started when a young African American shoe shiner, I guess we used to call them, regardless of what race they were, we used to call them shoe shine boys. But I suppose because he was black, he's now a shoe shiner as opposed to a shoe shine boy. I guess shoe shine boy is politically incorrect. So I would have liked to have seen what the Encyclopedia Britannica wrote about this before it became PC itself. And shoe shine boys became shoe shiners. So he assaulted a white elevator operator, and then things got out of control. So,
Hmm.
well, anyway, nobody cares about it. And
No,
I like,
I'd only heard about it because in the George Floyd stuff, it came up. Like it was resurrected and brought forward as an example of, the racist America. So that's the first time I'd ever heard about it. And definitely the numbers that I heard with it at that time were the 300. There was no mention of the lower possible estimate.
well, I get the impression that the blacks had a prosperous community in a certain part of Tulsa, and they were pretty well burned out. But this whole thing of race relations, I don't think it was ever good, frankly. But it's gotten much worse in recent years because of identity politics, where people have been programmed, have been told that identity politics, you're not a single individual, you're a member of a group. And the most obvious distinction to draw is you look at somebody, yeah, he's black. And this all really got out of control with Obama recently. Actually, it got out of control after in the 50s and the 60s when the government tore down all the black ghettos in northern cities and built vertical ghettos for them, like Cabrini
Compton.
Green. Food,
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I meant that.
yeah. So the situation seems pretty hopeless, even though if you watch the television, half of the happy families shown in commercials are of mixed race. But that's not a fact. And I think people don't know what to believe, frankly. You you can't believe your own eyes, certainly, because it's contradicted by everything that you see on television and read about in the news.
Well, I think you
So,
can believe your own eyes. But you cannot believe anything that you see through a screen. I think that's the issue.
yeah, yeah, don't believe who are you going to believe, me or your lion eyes?
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, for what it's worth, major race riot, Tulsa, Oklahoma, for 2 days, in between 30 and 300 people killed. But they all buried in mass graves. I thought only the Nazis did that. Anyway, who knows? Who knows what really happened? Who was at
Well,
fault? Who was good and who was bad? Maybe we'll never know.
we'll never know, but certainly the way it's portrayed now is that it was clearly just, the white people doing their racism thing. That's the way it was portrayed during the George Floyd, the BLM riots. I mean, mostly peaceful protests. I think that's what they were called.
Yeah. So I guess you believe what you want to believe. And what you want to believe depends on what the nearest five people around you believe. Or this is a bad situation. And it ties in with the conviction of Donald Trump in this kangaroo court in New York. I bet, would have bet a lot of money that it was going to be a hung jury, that out of the 12 people who were deciding on this bogus case, at least one, maybe two would say, look, I can't convict him on this. I don't even know what the crime was. All 12 of them convicted, and after a short period of time.
On all
So
34 counts.
on all 30, that's just, that's unbelievable. To convict him on all 34 counts after a short period of time. So now what's going to happen? What's
Yeah.
actually going to happen as a consequence of this?
I don't know. What do you think?
Hmm.
I mean, it was one of the most, I'll just say on social media yesterday, you could tell people were extremely fired up about it. And some of them were just shocked, like I think you were, that it happened. But and I think it's some people are, it's waking them up to the levels of corruption and rot in the system that they should have been aware of already, frankly, but maybe we're not.
Yeah, I think the powers that be, in the Democratic Party, I think they've just gone a bit too far. They wanted to make a point. They shouldn't have done whatever they did to make sure it was a 12-0 conviction to put Trump in jail. I mean, they're just pushing this a little bit too far.
Well, something we talked about earlier is that, this is essentially was a show trial. I mean, the judge controlled the evidence, wouldn't allow, like the guy from the who in charge of the Federal Election Committee that did an investigation that cost millions of dollars on this issue already with Trump and couldn't find anything to prosecute him with on the federal level, so they let it go. They wouldn't let him, for instance, come and testify that he didn't break any election laws. They definitely controlled and managed the evidence. The judge created the jury instructions in a confusing way for everybody. So there's lots of and the judge himself, apparently his daughter is a Democratic consultant who's worked for everyone you can imagine in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, so Trump is going to be, let me see, he was convicted. The next step is he's going to be sentenced. And when's that supposed to happen?
July 11th, which is just the week before the Republican National Convention.
Well, at this point, if the Democrats think about it, uh, it should be a suspended sentence. Anyway, that would be maybe things would defuse things a little bit. Okay, you made your point. But if they try to put him in jail, I can't believe that they would do something that inflammatory at that particular time.
Well, maybe they just do something like subject him to all kinds of nonsense, like he has to wear an ankle bracelet and he has to be tested randomly for drugs, and alcohol they could create all kinds of crazy rules, for you to follow, even if you're not in jail.
Yeah. Well, this absolutely can't end well. It really can't. We actually are heading towards a genuine civil war where two separate parties are trying to take control of one government. And in addition, I think these secession movements, which are kind of popping up various places in the US and the world, I think they're going to build momentum. So this is going to be a rough decade.
Well, I remember you saying at the beginning of the year, you predicted that 2024 would be the worst year in living memory.
Yeah,
How are we doing?
I think we're well on our way. And it used to be a joke, or I was making a joke when I said that I don't, I'd rather watch all this stuff on my widescreen TV from a safe location out on the Pampas than out my front window in the US. And well, here I am in the Pampas, and I really don't want to go to the US because at this point, anything can happen. I hope I'm dead wrong. I hope I'm dead wrong. But so far, I'm not, I don't think.
It's not looking good. I mean, this is one some so I heard saw a person on Twitter say, this is the first felony conviction of a former US president, and it wasn't for Iraq or the Afghanistan wars, illegal CIA coups, drone striking weddings, or spying on Americans. It was because Trump misclassified a $130,000 payment for a porn star's NDA.
That's right. They never try them about anything important or essential. It's like the impeachment of Bill Clinton. They didn't try to impeach him on anything serious. They tried to impeach him for an
Uh,
affair he had
perjury.
with an intern.
Well, technically, didn't they say perjury? Wasn't that the thing?
Yeah, yeah. These things fade into the mists of history, but it was over a triviality, just like Watergate. I thought it was a big nothing. I mean, I was living in Washington, D.C. while Watergate was going on. And I thought, well, okay. So some Republicans broke into the Democratic Party's headquarters to go through some files or see what was happening. This is not a big deal, but they made it into a really big deal. So, but nothing that actually was a big deal, like actual criminal things that the government was doing, was about a triviality.
Yeah. Yeah. And this, I think we talked before we started recording about this was, seems like, as an observer, a show trial. Like it was a setup. Of course, this guy has, constitutional protections. He's got, executive power protections. He's got, normal protections we all have as citizens, allegedly. And he goes through this process. He's denied, the evidence that might exonerate him is not represented in court. And then they come back with clean conviction on all charges. It just feels like Stalin-esque, as a show trial.
Well, at least Trump will be able to appeal. But what is this meme circulating around where the appellate judges for the district in which he's being tried, they're all black women? Do I have that right?
That is what is circulating. And I tried to look it up myself and I couldn't find it, except for on Twitter where it's been shared and there's been no community notes on it saying that it's incorrect. So I assume it must be true. Yeah. And it's 5 black women
Hmm.
on the New York City appeals court.
That is not a very diverse group. 5 black women.
It's also statistically impossible, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, of course, most lawyers that are being graduated today, just like most college students, are women. And there are many more blacks, I guess, than because of,
DEI hires. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But still, 5 out of 5. I'd like to find out more behind this meme to see if it's factual or semi-factual or fabricated. I mean, who knows? I really don't believe anything.
I'm not, I mean, I assume this is true because I saw multiple people talking about it, but when I tried to look myself, wasn't sure I was looking at the right court. Like, 'cause I don't, it's the appeals court system is weird. This is, I think this is New York City, so not New York State that he was charged in. So it wouldn't be the New York appellate. It would be the New York City appeals court, I believe. So I think that's correct. I think it is these 5 women.
Rather amazing. It kind of ties into the uncomfortable little rant that I indulged myself in on Wednesday, talking about how women seem to be taking over the world.
Yes, and I
And there
have
was
I
this
have something to
Canadian
share.
MP that went wild. Uh,
Yes, let me share that. She went wild, but she also provided me with a little education on the etymology of hysteria, which I think this is really useful. So let me just share this with everybody if you haven't seen it.
no, quite entertaining. Yes.
Start off by addressing one of the comments that was made by the witnesses around climate hysterics. Hysteria, it refers to something that is wildly emotional. It comes from the Greek word womb, of the womb. It is used in ancient Greek to refer to things associated with women. And I hope you'll forgive me if I get emotional. Climate emergencies are not gender neutral. The degradation of ecosystems disproportionately impacts women and girls. And I am wildly emotional. This is the existential crisis of our time. And to hear that we're asking for high ambition is climate hysteria, that makes me wildly emotional. Absolutely. When I think about my womb, the 2 children that I bore from that womb and what future we are leaving them, I am wildly emotional. And it's not surprising to hear this from someone who has written articles that are pro-life. Think that we need to think about the intersection of gender and the climate crisis. And I hope that the people around this table and the people listening will refrain from using language like climate hysteria. We are facing a climate emergency.
I mean, that really should have been a skit on Saturday Night Live back in the
It's
day.
hard to believe it's real. It's so perfect.
Yeah, she's talking about hysteria, where, in point of fact, she's actually hysterical.
She's exhibiting it perfectly. And what was the comment? I didn't understand what she said. Oh, it was not surprising this would come from someone who's pro-life. What does that mean exactly in relation to this?
I guess that
Pro-life
was
is
just kind of,
anti-women?
I don't know. We're dealing with a person here who's so loosely wrapped that she may be borderline crazy. I mean, she's irrational, not just hysterical, actually irrationally hysterical. And then she ties it into women and girls are affected most by the non-existent climate crisis. This is all nuts. And to think that she was elected by the populace, what the hell is the matter with them, the average person?
I mean, yeah, I think the big problem is the voters. Obviously, they keep putting people like this in charge. So, clearly we have to look in the mirror when you look at the elected leaders. If you vote, you have a responsibility for this.
Well,
So,
it's all about democracy, where the scum rises to the top. So
it's true.
it's not going to get better anytime soon, unless Trump is elected, and then our democracy is dead. But Trump is going to surround himself with the worst kind of people this time, just like he did the last time. Pretty hopeless. It really is.
It really is. But I like I'm going to start using hysteria more often. I mean, you called the COVID nonsense the COVID hysteria, and maybe you are hitting on a connection there that I didn't realize until seeing this video, though. Maybe it ties to all the other stuff. Maybe it ties to this, to the root of the word in a way. You know?
Yeah. Perhaps that member of parliament should consider a hysterectomy.
Exactly. She's not pro-life anyway, so.
Yeah, well, she pushes all the buttons, climate change, feminism. She didn't get it. Perhaps if she'd gone on a bit longer, she could have said women and girls and people of color are most adversely affected by the climate crisis.
I'm sure she would have gotten there. I'd like to look at some more videos of her. I'm sure there's probably other really great things that she's talked about before. I'll look for some more clips.
Yeah, she's destined for great things in the Canadian government, I'm sure.
So the other thing that happened yesterday, which was overshadowed by the Trump stuff, is that apparently all the NATO countries have now authorized Ukraine to attack Russia and Russian territory using weapons from NATO countries. So the US is on board with it now. Apparently, Biden gave permission in secret, but it was released last night. You know, in the news of all the Trump stuff, it was released amongst that. But they actually, on May 27th, all of the NATO, they had a NATO parliamentary assembly where they issued this declaration standing with Ukraine until victory. And I'll share a link to that document because people, if you haven't seen it, you should read it, as it just shows it's not a declaration of war, but it is damn close to it. It does not leave any room. It demands that that Ukraine be ushered into NATO as quickly as possible. It talks about creating a democracy center at NATO to further their efforts to push democracy into countries, which obviously Zelensky is a great representative of now that he's an unelected leader in Ukraine. I mean, it's insane. It's actually, I think that people don't know. I think these people don't understand what they're doing, in that they don't think that there are real world consequences for these actions. I mean, they are pushing Putin to a point, not just Putin, but his allies, which would be Iran, China, North Korea, to basically take aggressive action against NATO countries.
Yeah, that it appears that the draft, you read things about the draft coming back to Europe. For what reason? It's really just a shame. I mean, this border war over land masses, small land in the Ukraine, the Ukraine means borderland. Before it was created out of whole cloth by Lenin as an artificial country, there were constantly different populations going to and fro, and the border was always changing. I'm afraid that World War III is really on our doorstep. That's what it boils down to. That because the Russians are understandably, at this point, building up a massive army with hundreds of thousands of people are being trained. And it could get out of control really easily. And will he use a small tactical nuke? It might actually be a good idea at this time. It would slap the Western powers upside the back of the head and say, hey, look what happened here. We better start talking to them and stop acting like we own the world. I mean, Russia is a real country.
And there's talk about this as a strategy because the West seems unwilling to listen to anything that Putin has to say about anything. He needs to comply. And that's the end of the story from the West perspective. And so it's being talked about widely in Russia now as a strategy that it might make sense, a preemptive use of a tactical nuke in order just to demonstrate how grave the situation actually is.
Yeah, it's turning the average Russian paranoid, and for good reasons. I mean, they actually are afraid of being attacked and invaded by the West. So this is a very bad thing, and it's very likely to get out of control. So
Is there any way out that you can imagine from here?
The only way out is for somebody to sit down and talk to the Russians. And the Russians actually have a very good case. Crimea, which is one of the things at issue, it's not just the home port of the Russian Navy, but it's been a part of Russia since the days of Catherine the Great. And it's populated. About 80% of the people that live in Crimea are ethnic Russians, as with the Donbass. Those are ethnic Russians that Kiev had been attacking since 2014 and apparently killed about 20,000 people. We never heard about that until this dust up. So these things should become part of Russia. End of story. But that's not going to happen. I don't think considering the people that we have in control of the countries of the world, it just doesn't seem likely to happen. Unless perhaps Trump is elected. And I hate to say, I'm not a fan of Trump. He's just so vastly better than the demented Biden. And the Republicans stand for nothing. I mean, they're fairly worthless, but they're not actively and purposefully evil like the leadership of the Democratic Party is. But who knows? I mean, I didn't think that they'd convict Trump either. So who knows what's going to happen? This is like, somebody's got a magic 8-ball to tell us what's going to happen. It's a chaotic situation.
It is a chaotic situation, but there doesn't seem to be any leader that's currently anywhere with any authority in the West that would step up with some sanity. And I guess the hope is that maybe Trump would be that voice of sanity if he gets elected and takes control, if something doesn't blow up before then.
And if he's actually installed as president after he wins the popular vote, or is believed to win the popular vote. But with electronic voting machines and mail-in ballots and just generalized corruption, it's impossible to predict whether he'll really be installed as the president, even if the average American, whoever that might be, votes for him. So I can only see things getting worse. And the most thoughtful and competent and knowledgeable and rational world leader today is actually Vladimir Putin, who's been demonized and we're told is the new ranting and raving Hitler.
So what are the odds, if you were to put on it, that we will end up in a World War III scenario? Like where everyone recognizes it's World War III.
I think the odds are very high. This is a bad time to be in Western Europe or the U.S. It really is, from a pure physical safety point of view, from a pure when they round up the usual suspects point of view. I mean, I'm actually very loath to go back to the U.S. for the northern summer, because anything could happen overnight.
Overnight. I agree. I mean, I think if you hadn't really considered what World War III might mean to you and your family yet, I think it's time to start seriously considering it, because, draft is coming. We talked about this a year ago. I thought a draft was certain to happen. It's coming, I think, and the odds are substantially. I agree. I mean, I'd say it takes some unknown variable be introduced into the system, something that we don't even know about now, in order to change the direction of this. So,
yeah, it's people who don't think World War III can happen. Why should it be different this time, quite frankly?
that's a good point.
Okay,
Right.
well, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Okay, that's all you can do.
Yeah.
So did any of the listeners have any thoughts on what else would be good to talk about today?
Yeah, I got a few questions from people for us to cover today. So I didn't ask you about these in advance, so hopefully you're okay with them. First one is very curious as to whether either of us have experimented with LSD or psilocybin mushrooms, and if so, was it a pleasant experience for you?
Well, first of all, as the problems of Hunter Biden have drawn to the attention of people. It's that if you own weapons, if you own guns, apparently it's against the law to have done drugs in the past and disclose this to the government. So I'm loath to talk about now. In the past, it wouldn't have been any problem with any encounters I've had with drugs, but mushrooms. The last mushroom I tried was an Amanita muscara, which are those red mushrooms with the big white stalks, the ones that you see in fairy tale illustrations. And I didn't like it very much. It kind of made me feel woozy and physically sick. So anyway, I'm less interested in drugs as I get older because you lose control of your faculties under drugs. I'm not opposed to drugs in any way. I think you have to be prudent using them, just like you have to be prudent using alcohol and tobacco and food. Exactly. So they're in the same category as alcohol, tobacco, and food. You can abuse any of these things. So that's my view. I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I'll just say I think you can accomplish all of the same things through meditation, and it's better, and there's better clarity, and the results are more long lasting. So, I would say, yeah, I'm not interested in any of that stuff at this stage of my life.
And I would, if you want a good read, I mean, a little commercial here, the second of the novels that John Hunt and I wrote is called Drug Lord, which has a lot of interesting discussions on drugs in general and how to be a successful drug lord also, and why a drug lord is necessarily at all a bad guy. So
It was my favorite of the three so far. It was my favorite of the three.
yeah, a lot of people like that best, that particular book. Anyway, John's working, and it'll be passed over to me on Warlord, which is the fourth of the series. Anyway, it'll be even more radical.
Got to keep up. Okay, next question. Listening to us discuss the movie Civil War, which I saw and I don't think you've seen yet, said it made him wonder about other movies that you thought were worth watching. He remembers us in an interview a long time ago, us talking about Lord of War and others. But are there any movies that you can recommend as worthwhile watches?
Well, I'd say the classic war movie, in a way, is Dr. Strangelove. Almost every line, every actor in that movie is memorable, quotable. It's brilliant. So if you haven't seen Dr. Strangelove, absolutely rent it or buy it. So talking about war, and of course, when it comes to war movies, there have been a lot that have been really well done. I mean, so many that I don't know how many more that I'd mention, except I do want to mention Dr. Strangelove, since that movie was made in, I believe, like 1962. So a lot of people listening now may not have encountered it, since the movie is 60 years old.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, you mentioned the other day, was it Pebbles of the Sand?
The Sand Pebbles.
Sand Pebbles.
Yeah, with Steve McQueen. Yeah, that's an excellent movie about China around the time of
Boxer Rebellion, right? 1900?
Yeah, roughly then, when not far from the time where the Westerners were being attacked by the Boxers, the Boxer Rebellion. So that was actually an excellent kind of war movie too.
Yeah.
But there's lots of good ones. I mean, I'm a big fan of Platoon, which is more recent, but still, if it's not, once the movie gets to be 20 or 25 or 30 years old, the current generation may not see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you can go way back. There's a whole bunch. I know there's a whole bunch of Westerns you like as well.
Yes, I'm a huge fan of Westerns, because in Western, the reason why the elite pretty much universally despise Westerns is they cut to the essence of things. Man, woman, birth, death, sun, dirt. They all tend to be Aristotelian with a beginning and an end, joined by a plot line with a climax, the duel in the sun, typically, followed by a catharsis. And I like movies like that. They usually deal, I'm not talking about the Gene Autry, Roy Rogers genre. I'm talking about so-called adult Westerns. They deal with the basics of life and uncluttered by technology and special effects. And of course, then you've got science fiction, which is actually Westerns go to the future, where technology does get tied into it. Anyway, those are my favorite genres. Best movie I've ever seen? It's hard to say. There's so many that are so good. But in many ways, I'd have to put my finger on Casablanca.
Right.
All-time favorite movie? Maybe.
Can't go wrong. Yeah, I think you should go back a generation, whatever generation you are. I think try going back and sampling some movies from the prior generation. Because I think you'll be surprised that they, like the movies today, most people will look at them and they go, they suck. I mean, they're all like Marvel, nonsense. They're terrible. And I think that's definitely true. I mean, it's gotten really bad. But if you go back even just one generation before, if you talk about Westerns then, so maybe we're talking about like The Unforgiven, that Clint Eastwood movie, which was a extremely well done, sort of more modern Western, although it was, again, a generation ago already. But if you, go back one generation, I think you'd be surprised what's there.
Yeah, and I think today, actually, did I read this in the encyclopedia? Is this Clint Eastwood's birthday today? Because
That's
every movie that he's appeared in or produced or directed is worth watching and is well done.
Let me look.
I'll have to check. I think it's his birthday today.
Yep. Born May 31st, 1930.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, we've covered Taylor Swift's birthday. We should definitely talk about Clint Eastwood because you're right. And not only that, his movies are good that he starred in, the movies he's produced are good. And he still produces is it a movie every year or every 2 years? And he's 94 now.
Yeah, he's actually a model of virtue, Clint is. I mean, the fact that he's done the best that anybody could do. He's always been interested. I know this is a personal fact. He's always been interested in the life extension movement and things of that nature. And yeah, he's done about the best that you can do to live a full life.
And I heard this like fitness tip from him. It was probably when he was in his 70s. Someone's asked him how he stayed so healthy. And he's like, well, every day I do something physical. Like every day, no matter what, I do something physical. It doesn't have to be going to the gym or anything like that, but he's going to chop some wood or he's going to do something physical every single day. And I mean, it's worked.
Yeah, it obviously has. He's taken sand to throw on the slippery slope, which gets steeper as you get older. So congratulations to Clint. I mean, he's
a great day.
Yeah, great guy. Great guy as an individual, I think. I've never met him personally, but I know people that have out of the movie context. And he's just a great guy.
Yeah, if a man is going to be judged by his body of work is very impressive.
Yeah. So happy birthday, Clinton. You made the world a better place.
Certainly did. Okay, next question. High-profile people are typically busy and next to impossible to come in contact with. Is there a technique that works for engaging in a phone conversation with such people? He says not mega high people like Mick Jagger, but like, lower or middle high people.
Well, I think the problem that we've got here, I mean, I think the questioner is looking to elevate his position and status in the world. And an excellent way of doing that is by associating with people that have more of what you value: fame, money, intelligence, knowledge. But maybe that question is improperly phrased, because meeting people with higher status, more money and more status, I think the only real way to achieve that is by becoming one of them yourself. So what this means is that why should somebody who has succeeded in the world, Clint Eastwood, for instance, why does he want to talk to any one of hundreds of millions of people that would love to have a beer with them? You've got to actually be of caliber and that status yourself in order to meet the people you want to meet. So how do you do that? Well, right now, Maxim, your son, is engaging in exactly that process. He's reading books, he's doing things, he's improving and transforming his character so that he doesn't have to worry about meeting people of the status he'd like. People will be wanting to meet him in the future, 10 years from now, after he succeeds in his personal, it's not a transformation, but
Development.
it's a
Development.
improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Taking yourself from being an ordinary person, just like 8 billion other people in the world, and making yourself something special. Nobody can make you somebody special except you yourself. So I guess that's the answer to the question. It's a natural, organic thing. You'll get your desire when you make yourself one of the people that you want to meet. Put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing is the only way you ever want to you ever want to meet a high profile person anyway is not, you want to be introduced to them, because a high profile person meets people all the time, and they have a natural block basically to people who are kind of coming at them. And so the only way that you can, because what you want is, you don't want to just meet them. It's like, having a celebrity encounter at a cafe. I mean, it means nothing anyway. You want to, if it's a person that you admire, you really want a relationship with them, or the hopes of maybe there might turn into a relationship. And that only happens if you're introduced to them. And somebody wants to make the connection between the two of you. And so there's, right? Don't you think you have to be introduced to anybody that's substantial?
Yeah, that's so helpful. It really is. I mean, in my case, personally, having written several books that did well, the books acted as introductions to those people.
Yeah. A public body of work.
Exactly. So I'm not sure that fame, well, it's funny, in the ancient Greek society, there was a concept called kleos, which is basically fame, high regard by other people. Well, should you seek fame? The ancient Greeks certainly did. But yeah, do things that will make other people notice you in a favorable light. That's the best way to solve that problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Just one tactical thing I think it's worth sharing is that, no matter who people are or what status they are, there is a normal way that they engage with new people in the world. Like, for instance, when you would go to travel all around the world and you wanted to get to know the people that mattered in that area, you would go and you'd meet with lawyers. And those lawyers, you'd get to know the lawyer, and then the lawyer would then introduce you to other people. So these high profile people, they do have a way that they meet new people, but it's through people they know already. And one of those doors that's always open to you is a lawyer, for instance.
Yeah, that's right. People that are really up on the top rung like to use filters so that they can meet only people that are worthy of meeting. And you've got to start at some place with somebody that will filter you to the way up.
Yeah, I call that the open door. Like, everyone has an open door, the way by which they can receive the right people into their life. But you have to be the right person, and you have to seek that open door so that you can be properly introduced to them, rather than them just, you meet them in a cafe and get a photo bomb or something.
Yeah, exactly. And you got to remember, that if there's an open front door, there should also be an open back door where if you don't make it, you're kicked out.
100%. It always is. Yep. All right. What do you think it is that the Mises caucus people usually fail to get their candidates in place in the Libertarian Party?
Well, I thought the Libertarian Party, who was the guy that actually founded the Libertarian Party back in, I don't know when it was, late 60s, I guess. And oddly enough, I forget his name. He was kind of a typical libertarian. And I have a problem with people that are professional libertarians. And the Libertarian Party draws professional libertarians. And typically, they're nerdy, kind of cranky intellectuals that don't succeed too well in the real world. Most professional libertarians are poor as church mice. And they think that holding libertarian beliefs makes them different and special. So I'm very unimpressed with the Libertarian Party and the people that are members of it. They're the type of people that would really like to be big shots in the Republican or Democrat Party, but they're little fish in a big pond. So they've created a little pond where they can be big fish. And I'm not a fan of the Libertarian Party. Actually shameful. The people that are the professional libertarians that are in and around the party are exactly the type of people that give libertarianism a bad name because they tend to be weird and kooky and off-putting.
David Nolan.
David Nolan, yes. Is he still alive? You're quite correct.
Didn't see that. Is he still alive?
David came to the first meeting of the Era Society in 1979 in Aspen.
Hmm.
So I haven't seen or heard anything from him since, but that was his one distinguishing thing. Well, it's a big deal. You form a political party that gets registered eventually in all 50 states. But
He died in 2010.
oh, is that right? Hmm. Well, sic transit gloria mundi. He had his 15 minutes of fame, had his day in the sun. And if his legacy is the Libertarian Party, not the best legacy possible.
Oh, especially when you see the new candidate. Not that the other ones were much better. But
No.
the next question is, why did the Libertarian audience at the convention boo Trump? Even though we don't agree with a whole lot of what he does, wouldn't it make more sense for them to give him a warm welcome so as to try and sell him on more liberty-based thinking and positions?
That's just further proof that the average libertarian, sad to say, is a yahoo. I mean, look, I was not at that convention. I don't like to go to conventions, and certainly not political conventions. But all these libertarians would have been dressed in weird and inappropriate manners, and they acted inappropriately. When you have somebody who's a national figure who's presented himself to your company, I mean, you treat him in a polite way. And in Trump's eyes, libertarians are discredited by the way that he was treated.
Hmm.
I would have treated him, politely, cordially, tried to carry on an intelligent discussion with him about things of mutual interest, but acting like a yahoo in a crowd and booing him so that he couldn't even effectively give a speech. I mean, it's just really stupid.
Right. I mean, especially, these are obviously people that are interested in politics. That's why they're there. So if they want to have, and if you're interested in politics, which I'm not, I would never join any party. But if you buy into that, then you want to have influence. You want to have influence ideas. You want to change the way things are politically organized and the results of the political process. And what they did was make sure that they would have, not that, I don't know if they would have had any impact, but they certainly made it so they cannot and will not.
Yeah, and that was crowned by the nomination of a complete non-entity who's just weird and has all kinds of actually on libertarian ideas. I mean, this is a non-presentable person that they made their candidate for president. So the Libertarian Party should be flushed. And I know that the Mises crowd within that party tried to do it and they failed. So the Libertarian Party is a write-off for the foreseeable future anyway.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine it ever turns into anything different, though, than what it
No.
is, honestly. Okay.
No, its whole basic character is weird, geeky people full of, in fact, it's probably full of incels too. I mean, no, it's shameful. The Libertarian Party and its members give libertarianism, the philosophy, a bad name. It's completely perverse.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up from here. There was one more question related to for me, but I don't think it's important. So
Oh, wait a minute. What was it?
he just says, if he says, this is more a question for me, for Matt. Are there any books or resources or people who had a notable impact in your way of thinking as an entrepreneur? And was there a moment when it all made sense to you and knew how to succeed? So I guess my answer to that would be there never was a moment when everything made sense because the business challenge is always different. I think that probably the single most notable impact in the way of my thinking as an entrepreneur probably came from Zig Ziglar, actually, who I love, who said, they had a simple thing that if you can have everything in life you want, if you help enough other people get what they want. And that's the nature of entrepreneurship, fundamentally.
Yes, it is. It's the nature of capitalism.
Exactly.
It's a good
So-
point. Excellent point. That's right.
I've read hundreds of books about business and management and yeah, I don't know. Many of them have their strengths, but I couldn't point to one. But that core philosophical idea that, because a lot of times when people start a business, they're thinking about what they want. I don't want to work for anybody. What do I want? And it's totally irrelevant what you want, actually.
That's
It's
right.
how can you be useful?
Yeah, and it shouldn't be hard because there's 8 billion people in the world and all of them want a lot of goods and services. There's huge demand. I mean, these so-called economists that say we've got to create demand by printing money. No, there's unbelievable, infinite, unlimited demand because everybody really wants everything. If you got one car, you want two. So you can become a rich person just by fulfilling the desires of these other people who want everything. So help them make it happen.
That's right. And more acutely by solving their problems, the things that are really, like, you have different problems if you're rich than you do when you're poor, but you still have problems. And, if you solve problems of people who are more affluent and they have plenty of them, and if you ask them, talk to them about their problems, you'll find things that you can do to solve them of great value to them that they will happily pay you for.
Perfectly stated.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's it for now, Doug. As long as there aren't any nukes that fly over the weekend, we'll be back next week with more.
Yeah. Yeah. With a little bit of luck, we'll be around for next Wednesday or whenever.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. Have a great weekend, Doug.
Thanks, Matt. You too.